Welcome. This is LCC Radio, WLNZ 89.7 here in Lansing, Michigan. You're listening to Lansing Online News Radio. I am Bonnie Buckaroo, and I'm going to soon be joined by my co-host, Bill Castanier. You can also catch us on our live webcast this week. I actually got the computer to run, and everything went straight this time. So if you go to www.lansingonlinenews.com, you can see the live webcast. Good to see you, Bill. It's been
And we signed on with no problems this morning.
I know we had
this afternoon
a technical glitch-free night. Wow, maybe this is the beginning of a wonderful new era.
I hope.
I hope. But you said you had a couple announcements tonight. There's some good news about a good friend of ours who has been on this show. Some of you faithful listeners may remember local playwright Sandra Seaton. She was the playwright in residence at the MSU College of Law for a year or two, I believe.
Right, and she was the first writer in residence in a College of Law in the United States.
Yeah.
Which was kind of interesting.
Isn't that a nice idea for a program?
It was a very clever idea. I hope they continue it later on. I mean, at a different time. It was a very clever idea.
I do too, yeah, great idea. But she's just received a new honor. What is the honor that she has received?
Sandra Seaton will be awarded Wednesday. Let me get this right. It is the Society for the Study of Midwestern Literature.
Oh.
They award the Huck Finn, actually the Mark Twain Award. And in the past it has been awarded to some very, very important writers. Toni Morrison, Jane Hamilton, Louise Erdrich, Jim Harrison, Harriet Simpson. It goes on and on. It's an amazing list. And this year she's honored.
Oh, that's great.
It is. It's a special thing. From what I could tell and what she could tell, she's the first playwright ever.
Is that right? Wow, what an honor.
I mean, we're talking Arthur Miller. I mean, he's not on the list.
I went last year to the reading that was done in one of the galleries in Old Town of her new play. And it's
the music story or the music party?
Yeah.
Right.
And it's, she does wonderful work, and I saw her just the other day too over at the event that they had at the closed Barnes and Noble where they did the Sustainable Art Project over there, part of that new Eli Road series throughout the summer until the museum opens in the fall. But it's so good to think that she's going to be joining that
Right,
pantheon.
and I've got a story in Wednesday's Pulse, which I'll also post on Lansing Online News and also on Mitten Lit. But I had one of those duh moments when I was talking with her. It seems obvious after she told me, but she told me a play is never finished.
Oh,
it's organic. Every time she sees it, she rewrites it.
Is that right?
That's what playwrights do, because she said the play is only one part of the formula. There's the director, the stage, the staging, and the spoken word.
Yeah.
And she might see it done in a better way and change it.
Oh,
and I went, I've never thought of that. It's not like a book. A book is forever.
Well, people are always taking notes in plays. Shakespeare's plays don't stay the same, I guess.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I was pretty amazed. She's written 12 plays. She says that's about it.
Is it really?
Yep. And now the rest of her career will be spent getting those plays produced as many times as possible.
Oh, that's wonderful. Well, you have another item coming up on the agenda.
Right.
There is
the Greater Lansing
tour.
Right. The Greater Lansing Historical Association next Friday is sponsoring an architectural tour of what's called the Potter House in Lansing. It's probably Lansing's largest mansion. It was built by the Potter family, the same family that donated the land for Potter Park. And it's over near the Governor's House on Cambridge.
How'd they make their fortune?
They made their fortune in the timber industry. They're timber scouts, really, and then they bought property. They speculated on land, really, on the West Coast. And then they sold it to Weyerhaeuser. But they liked this area, so they moved back here. But that's basically how they made their money, and then they became philanthropists in the city. They gave their money away.
Wow.
And then after the second group to own it was the Catholic bishops. They painted everything green. They covered the murals. They did everything.
I'm restraining myself as we speak.
It's not one of the high points of ownership for them.
There was a time where that would have been considered a plus.
Right. I learned tonight that the first offer that the church made on it wasn't accepted because Catholics could not live in their neighborhood.
Oh.
They were the only ones excluded.
Oh.
Well, they knew something we didn't, I guess.
Well,
so that's next Friday.
You've seen the house?
Oh, I've seen it several times because we've been working on it. It is gorgeous, and I can't imagine what it would cost to build today.
Probably not possible even.
You'd have to have more money than anyone in Lansing has.
Yeah.
But I learned also that the second owner bought it for the third owner bought it for $60,000.
Oh my goodness.
Like 25 years ago. That's
25 years ago.
That's not much.
No.
This house is millions. This house costs millions.
Well, you know, some of those huge, well, they were considered really mausoleums. We've seen this in urban areas where it was impossible to keep them restored. You couldn't even afford to heat them. And so they were really such a drug on the market that people, had to almost give them away in order to get anybody to take them over.
That's what we were telling us tonight when we were just spending a little time with Larry. Cosentino was writing a story about it. I don't remember this, but they said the house was totally overgrown with vines. There were tunnels cut in through the shrubs to get in the house.
Oh.
I mean, it was that. It had become just a mausoleum. And with the Catholic bishops there, that was, they didn't really do the upkeep necessary. I mean, it's too expensive.
There was a beautiful area in Cleveland when I was a young child that was called Bratnall, which was, these huge mansions. And it really became just sort of a squatter's heaven after a while because there was nobody who could afford to keep them up. It's sort of, I think that's what we're going to see in the final episode of Downton Abbey in 2025, when they finally take it up to modern day. It's going to be how you can't afford to keep those castles.
Well, they were a couple of years ago talking about tearing down Shakespeare's residence.
Ooh, I wouldn't think that.
No one could afford it.
Oh, wow. I figured they figured out a way to save that one.
Yes. Fun bake sales. I think the roof on this house would cost you $1 million to replace. But what the idea is, the Historical Society has been doing architectural tours of famous and regular buildings in Lansing, like Sexton High School, and pointing out the aspects of it that show architectural history. And the reason they chose this house is because it's the largest mansion, but also it's built with steel and concrete. It's not traditional building materials.
The Timber King built a house with steel and concrete?
Yep. And then
what was he thinking?
I think he wanted it to last.
Ah.
It does not move. It doesn't move. I mean, everything stays pretty much the same.
Is it tornado proof as a result?
Pretty much. A tornado hit the roof last year and only took off a few tiles.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Are those nice ceramic type tiles? Or?
They are slate, real slate.
Real slate.
The roof itself is massive project. It cost $1 million. So, I mean, keeping it up is a lifetime chore, and people have to love what they're doing.
Decades ago, it was in the early, what would it have been? About 62 or 63, I ended up in Sullivan, Illinois, and they were a very affluent woman whose husband had been a judge and she'd been an opera singer who toured the world. She donated her beautiful mansion to turn it into a nursing home, and the challenge was that you could not keep it insured if nobody was living there. So we were given the place. My husband at the time, married early, married often. That's my plan. My first husband. We moved down there, and he was the manager of a plastics plant in town, and we got to live there for free in this fabulous place. It had a real Victrola from her era with her recordings and beautiful chandeliers and all this wonderful stuff. But they actually thought it was just too expensive to bring it to the upkeep. So basically, they just got it. And it was really sad to see all those wonderful things disappear. You just couldn't do that anymore. No more hardwood floors. All gone. Had to go to nice asphalt tile for nursing.
Well, it's interesting. The living room in this house is made of a special wood that can't take the weight of a woman on a high heel anymore.
Oh yeah. Those are actually very good. I read this.
Like the heart of a wood.
Pounds per square inch.
Exactly.
That's right. I took an insurance course years ago, and they would kill asphalt tile if those spike heels would. Yeah,
right through it.
Yeah,
very dangerous. Yeah. So they have to be kind of aware of who's visiting their home.
Oh, that's right.
They go right through the floor.
I think we're going to have somebody on maybe next week, if we can, to talk a little bit more about the
it's not making it up like I am. Valerie Martin is the president of the Historical Society. She's a professional tour guide at the Capitol, and she knows this stuff.
Oh, that's going to be great.
And I think she taught the owner actually a couple things tonight that he did not know, and he was very pleased. She's done amazing research on this house.
Now, this is the State Historical Society?
No, it's the Greater Lansing Historical Society, and house tour is next Friday at 6 o'clock.
A week from this Friday.
Right, and it's $50. It's a fundraiser.
Well, we're not allowed to say the amount.
That's right.
It's
so
a
it's
non-profit. So we're just, it's some
that's a donation.
Unspecified amount.
It's a donation.
It's one of those. That's the people learn all those. Yeah. Some of our guests are looking at us like, "Are you out of your mind?"
We can't can't actually
Any kind of
advocate
public
for something.
radio, you can't even mention if something is free.
I have heard that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the way the
We've been doing
FCC
it for
rules
so long.
are.
We've been so good, I have forgotten.
I know. We've actually been very good on the issue. But tonight we're going to do an interesting thing. We're going to sort of open this up as a symposium. And we have 3 prominent women from the area, different ages, different backgrounds, and we're going to be doing a kind of round-robin discussion about women's issues in the area. I thought I'd kick off with the news here that Susan Maston, we're joined by Susan Maston from Michigan State University, Penny Gardner, who is also from Michigan State University, and also Becky McHenry. Now, she is a student at Michigan State University, recent graduate of LCC, and she's going to be writing for Lansing Online News this summer, doing some political things. But Susan and I wanted to make an announcement tonight. Susan, should you tell them what our wonderful new title is?
Sure. Well, Bonnie and I are thrilled to announce that we are now both serving as co-presidents of the Lansing Area Now National Organization for Women. We were elected last week by the membership, and we're just thrilled to serve in this capacity. We're thrilled we're looking forward to rejuvenating the chapter. Hasn't been all that active, so we're hoping to have some meetings over the next few weeks with other prominent women. I'm not sure that I'm prominent, but anyway, energetic, yeah, with prominent women in the area. We've also been working with the the Peace Ed Center Women's Task Force, and I've got my little notes over here. We're co-sponsoring a movie night in a couple weeks, so things are really
We
looking
really want to hit
positive.
the ground running, you know. It seems, Penny Gardner from Michigan, doesn't it seem like women's issues are back on the front burner again?
Hallelujah, hallelujah.
About time?
It's about time. There's been a long dearth of information and activity and energy around women's issues, and I must say that I appreciate Mitt Romney
For bringing us all together.
Newt Gingrich, and
especially Rick Santorum.
Oh, and
And
Ricky
Bob
Santorum,
McDonald.
and Michelle Bachmann, and Sarah Palin. There's just a long line of, not to mention the state legislature, and not to mention the Congress. I mean, and it's about, and I hate that we have to come up against a blockade in order to not be complacent. And I'm loving that we're here. I'm loving that you all are doing what you're doing. It makes me want to renew my membership.
Good.
And I love that Becky's here and she's going to be writing, and I can't wait to read more of it.
Becky, when you hear women on campus talking about some of these things that have come up, access to contraception, the ability to have contraception paid under your health care. I mean, Viagra is paid for automatically because that's a real medical condition, right? But we don't want to pay for that women's contraception. That's too expensive. There's always been this disproportionate expense for women's health that has really put a burden on women who are trying to get insurance because it's an additional premium. Do young women really feel under assault, or are they as aware as they should be of what's happening?
I don't think we are. I think we have not a minority, but a very small group of women who are very proactive in joining groups and attending rallies and signing petitions. And I just think we live in a culture now that's kind of, it's all a big distraction. We're not really focusing on what's happening around us. I'm always under the, I guess, I feel like we should be more independent women ourselves, and we need to be self-sufficient financially, and we need to be confident, and then if we get to that root of the problem, maybe we'll be more involved with, groups and rallies and start to pay attention to our outside world too.
Penny, you talked to me. We were down at that rally at the Capitol a few weeks ago that was held down there, and you told me about how you became an activist. That was an experience in your life that you made a conscious decision. This is what I want to do.
First of all, I'm 71 years old, so you're going back. some time.
Yes.
So, and you have to put it in historical context. So I was born in the 40s and raised in the 50s, and that what I knew is that women weren't really, we didn't say no often. We were compliant, and that in order to be attractive to men, we had to be compliant and stuff. And I was a housewife with 3 kids, and was asked by another woman to volunteer for a coffee house for housewives in suburbia. And the coffee house was called It's Open for Women, and the developer provided the space for this so that the women and the housewives could have
Their coffee
place.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, because I had no interest in this, but I couldn't say no. So I said yes, that I would do this, and that to volunteer and help with this. And part of what happened is that the women who were putting it together were pretty thoughtful, and we had a program one day a week, and then for the coffee hour, and then on another day a week, and we only met 2 days a week, there was like what were those encounter groups?
Oh, sensitivity training.
Who's the most destructive thing that ever happened to anybody?
Whose arms did you have to trust or fall
I
into?
don't know. I got in trouble because I complained about a woman who was knitting at the time, and everyone said, "You can't complain about it. She gets to do." I know, anyway, but I said yes.
That radicalization.
I know. But the other thing is that they had a program on women's liberation from the people in Baltimore, which were one of the first of the second wave of people who had the women's liberation, and they came and spoke, and I was hooked. And I went down, I think, the next day to downtown Washington, D.C. to volunteer for the women's division of the Edmund Muskie campaign.
Oh, wow.
And I haven't stopped since.
Uh-huh.
I haven't stopped since. And part of this, and this is the sensational part of the story, because God knows it's me, but I was a Playboy bunny before this. And so what I wrote was about from Playboy bunny to feminist lesbian activist.
That's quite the transition, isn't it?
Professor. Yeah.
Gloria Steinem made it part of the way.
Yeah, but that was her set. That was she was there as a journalist, and I was there to support my 3 kids.
Why you had 3 kids? Wow.
I did. Yeah, I was.
Wow.
You weren't able to tell them that, were you? Playboy bunnies, and you had your
Well, here's what I did, and this is how I had my second marriage, was that people would ask me if they could have my phone number, and of course we weren't supposed to give it, but people broke rules, you know how it is. And so they would, and I'd say, because I was tough, I'd say, well, you couldn't support me and my 3 kids, and usually that just put, you're right. And this man that asked me for my phone number said, oh, yes, I can. And I said, 435-4792. 6 weeks later, we were living in whatever
you go for marry early, marry often too.
Yeah, I do. I do. And I was married to him for 28 years.
Wow, that's great.
We were
Great story.
an amazing scandal in
Were you?
Washington, D.C. Well, I was a Playboy bunny. He was a professional Jewish. He was a professional who was Jewish, and the Jewish community was with Penny Sullivan. I was Penny Sullivan at the time, with Johnny Bridget and Casey Sullivan kids.
Wow.
Involved with a Jewish man. Well, I didn't mean to talk about all that. I just wanted to throw in the Playboy bunny.
I'm always
a
interested.
good story I hadn't heard.
I think it's wonderful to find out how people reach that sort of point of enlightenment where they say, the world is not as, I read Betty Friedan in high school. When we moved from upstate New York to Jackson, Michigan, when I was in the 10th grade in high school, I would be starting the 11th grade here. When we came to this town in Jackson, Michigan, my parents announced, well, I think when we get there, in order to enhance your father's career, we've decided that we will send you to Catholic school. So we want you to say we were always Catholic. Of course, we're rocker and atheists. What are we doing here? I mean, it was this idea that you did anything to fit in.
Exactly.
And it was that conformist 50s mentality that said, and it was especially oppressive for women. It really said that I was graduating from high school in 1962, and there were 582 students in Jackson High, and they were trying to determine, they didn't name it the valedictorian, but they gave person first place academically, and it meant something if you were trying to get scholarships. And the principal of the high school called me into his office in April, and he said, you know, we've gone back in all the records. You happen to be tied in your grades. You've got a solid 4 point all the way back to fourth grade. And he said, we can't literally get any grades beyond that. And you're tied with this other young man for number one slot in the class. And he said, we were trying to decide what to do. And I said, well, obviously, you know, we just tie for it, right? And he said, oh, no. He said, we've made a decision. Because you'll just get married and have children, and he's going to have to worry about a career. We're going to make him number one and you number two. You know, that radicalized me overnight. I mean, that was one of those click moments. Now Magazine, Ms. Magazine had an article once about how there are times in life where somebody does something. It's kind of like after Thanksgiving dinner when they say, and now the women will do the dishes while the men relax. You know, that's the sort of thing that makes every woman in the room go,
Hopefully.
something changes.
Hopefully.
Yeah. Now, did you have a click?
I wanted to take auto mechanics in high school and they wouldn't let me.
See?
It was before Title IX.
Oh, that's what made all the difference.
And
What year was that?
The Title IX was 72, so I graduated in 75, so it must have been like as a freshman.
Oh.
But I wanted to take, and it may have even been post Title IX because I don't remember. April Truitt, when I was a senior, was the first woman in my high school that was allowed to take auto mechanics. It was actually my mom that wouldn't let me take auto mechanics.
Oh, your own mom.
Yeah.
Isn't that true? Yeah.
And it was funny because my mom and dad had a big argument because my dad wanted me
Your
to take
dad was the one who, oh, wow. Oh, that's great.
He thought it was a great thing to want to do, and he's like, "Well, if you're driving, you should know how to, fix the car." And but back then it was boys took shop, girls took home ec.
Yes.
And boys took, if they took home ec, it was bachelor, cooking or something called something like that.
Right.
And
We learned about diapers. I remember making a apron.
Yeah.
And it was terrible. An apron is just a strip of material and another piece
A little piece
and
of
it was
hand
like,
up.
it was terrible. I think I'd probably sometime.
This is LCC Radio, WLNZ 89.7 here in Lansing, Michigan. Susan, you went on to become a professor of engineering, and women engineers are still a very rare commodity in the
less than 20% of our student body are women.
Has that stayed static for decades?
It actually increased for a while. It was up a little over 20% and has steadily dropped in the last. It's fairly steady in the 18 to 19%. Why it doesn't increase much beyond that, it's hard to know. Certain fields are have a much higher percentage of women. I'm an environmental engineer. I joke around that the only time I was a chemistry major as an undergrad. So there were women in that program. In environmental engineering, we were roughly 50%.
Interesting.
Even through the early 80s. Now we're still, environmental engineering is still one of the fields of engineering that typically has somewhere between 40 to 50%. In fact, one of my students at the beginning of the year, the semester, looked around at the beginning of class, and we were over in Wells Hall, and looked around and said, "Am I really in an engineering class?"
Too many women in the room.
Who's got a woman professor, and it was more than half women. So it really, it's very dependent on the program. Chemical engineering tends to have a pretty high percentage of women. Some of the other programs,
mechanical,
electrical, computers tend to be much lower.
That's sort of frustrating because really our generation Penny and I are probably pretty close. I'm 68, you're 71, so we come out of that born in the 40s, grew up in the 50s era. We've seen radical change. I mean, for women, just a dramatic change since when we were young. With
But
the
it's
opportunities.
but it feels more like when we were young now.
It feels as though
But
we're
back,
sliding
yeah.
backwards.
And I get that from my students too. They what I think one of the things that we talked about too, Bonnie, was about the collective consciousness.
Yes.
That I think that that students now, and Becky, I'd love to check it out with you if you understand it that way too. They don't think in terms of a collective consciousness. It's not for the good of the class. It's not for the good of the team in terms of study collaboration.
Absolutely.
It's what's in it for me.
Yeah, I think that's a big problem because it's, I mean, I use social media as a good example. Social media kind of makes people more self-involved, and they don't think about what's going on around them. They're constantly, we're just constantly tuned into what's going on in a group of friends and what's going on in our own lives, and we don't really pay attention to what's happening and, with the war on contraception. I mean, I feel like people are aware of it, but nobody in my age group, or very few, are really understanding how severe it is and how much we have backtracked.
Yeah.
And I wonder when we're actually going to get to that point where we can, or if we can get to that point where we're going to, become a collective consciousness. I don't know if that's...
One of the things we're trying to do to energize the local Lansing area now chapter is use social media to try to do outreach to younger generations. Mm-hmm. But social media is kind of interesting because there's two kinds of uses of social media. There's what they call life casting, which is, I'm headed to have a latte. And I don't know why I need to know that, but it's sort of like, dear robbers, please find my house now. So you have to be a little careful with the life casting, when you're forswearing and saying that I'm mayor in the pizza parlor now because the robbers can go get you at home. But then there's also what's called mind casting, which is talking about issues. Mm-hmm. And social media can also, as we've seen with the Arab Spring, be an incredibly powerful tool for organizing. If you do, I think as young women find, we're facing here, right in Michigan, 40 bills in the legislature. Mary Pollock, who is the state legislative liaison for the state, Michigan now, 40 anti-choice bills are rocketing through the legislatures. There's nothing to stop them. We have a Republican governor, Republican state Supreme Court, Republican Attorney General. Both houses of the legislature are dominated by Republicans to the point that even if all the Democrats took off and refused to vote, they still have a quorum. They can still put everything through. And we're going to see things like new bills on fetal remains, where before you can have an abortion, a woman is going to be told, and how would you like those remains taken care of? Would you want that child cremated? Or will you want that child buried? And that's a real chill effect. It's, the idea is that they want to show respect, but in reality it's cloaking messages that are designed to drive women away from exercising this choice.
Mm-hmm. I'm thinking about the student interest rate thing, and that how they're
for student loans.
For student loans, that they're going to pay that through taking money away from women's health care.
Yes.
And what's with that? What's with that?
What I don't even understand is the lack of outrage.
Yeah.
If you thought your student loans interest rate was going to double, would you not be outraged? Would you not be demonstrating? Would you not be writing letters? Would you not be phoning? What is it, and what will it take to outrage this group of students?
Young women are really under siege, and if they don't realize it,
Yeah.
There's this idea that this is a manufactured and phony war, that it's ginned up in order to be able to get the Democrats to sweep the election in the fall. But there's just too much going on. The rights are being rolled back right now.
I have no doubt that this war on women is being used as a distraction, just like gay marriage was in the 2004 election. But that still doesn't change the fact that what they're proposing is real.
Yes.
It might be a distraction, but it's a very real distraction.
And rights are eroded.
Exactly. And I mean, it's the same as gay marriage was used in 2004. And while it was a complete distraction from what was going on in foreign policy, they still just attacked LGBT rights.
Yeah.
And the same thing's going to happen with women. And I don't know if we're just maybe too cynical at this point to even form together.
This is
I really
LCC
wonder.
Radio, 89 WLNZ, 89.7 here in Lansing, Michigan. I think, when you look at the different waves of feminism, I mean, there were the suffragettes who really were able to get the vote for women, and we were certainly not the first to get the vote. I mean, New Zealand was many decades ahead of us, and Australia as well, and other countries. So we've always been a bit of a laggard culture on some women's issues. Then there were the second wave feminists, and the feminists of Penny and Glenn, my generation. Many of us forget. Gloria Steinem came from Clark Lake, not far from where I grew up. I mean, she's a local girl made good kind of thing. And so there was that group of women, and we were all willing to burn bras, take to the streets, do whatever it took to try to get things to change. We failed in passing the ERA. That I think was a real tragedy. I think that the Phyllis Schlaflys of the world were able to beat that back, and that was unfortunate. But I think many of us felt that the civil rights laws covered us well enough anyhow that we were able to use them to make great strides. The third wave feminists, however, I think really were lulled into a false sense of security that they could worry about other issues because those had been secured. I'm not sure they've realized those aren't really secure anymore.
Is there a third one?
Yeah. There's two groups. There's the sort of, they call themselves the hollaback group, HOLLABACK. They're the ones willing to holler back when the guys start yelling and whistling at you on the street. There's a sort of activist group, but they've not been large in numbers. But the third wave feminists have said it's time to worry more about economic issues and family issues, that we don't have to worry about the political sphere as much because those rights have been secured.
And it would be so nice if that were true. If we could do that, that would be fabulous.
Yeah.
Well, it's amazing to me that in 2012, on average, a woman still makes 77% of what a man makes. In Michigan, it's about 74%. And if you look at women with a college degree, and you look at this discrepancy between their income and men's income, it actually has widened significantly in the last 2 decades. So in that respect, we've gone backwards.
Yeah.
On one hand, we think we have so many more opportunities. We think things are so much better. I mean, and they are better. I mean, when my mom and dad were married in 1955, my mom had to turn over the car to my dad because she couldn't own anything as a married woman. The house was in my dad's name. So, yes, some things are better, but we're not there yet.
No, we're nowhere.
We're a long way away, and we're sliding back, in my opinion. And I'm trying to figure out how it is to engage young people. I know I talk about when I introduce myself to the class at the beginning of a semester, I say that I'm feminist and a lesbian, and that I am where I am because of my activism. But through activism, I gained so many skills in terms of public speaking, in terms of critical thinking, in terms of keeping informed on public affairs, and all the opportunities for such a damn good time. I mean, we had wonderful times.
We did. There's nothing better than moral outrage.
And
embracing.
And the dances and the outrageousness and the just who we were. But for me, it has brought me to a doctoral degree that I got at the age of 60 something. I can't remember exactly. But I wouldn't have had ever gone to college if it hadn't been for my activism. Yeah. And that's what I try and tell my students is that take it, don't do it for yourself. I mean, don't do it for other women. Do it for yourself. I mean, because they don't have this collective consciousness, but use it as a place to gain skills. And I know that's
rights are something that we always have to fight for. They're never something that are achieved and then you get to put that on the shelf somewhere and they stay that way forever. I remember a whole generation of women that I knew who became attorneys. And the saddest thing in the world, one of them left private practice and went to work work in the field of criminal justice because she said, I got tired of handling the divorces of women in their 50s whose husbands were leaving them, who had grown up with the expectation that our generation did, which was that they would always be taken care of. That was the bargain. If you give me the children and you are faithful and you take care of the home for me, then I will keep and support you and treat you like a princess. And then all of a sudden at 50 to 60 years old, they were finding themselves out on the street with very little and no job skills. And she said it was just so profoundly depressing to see women caught in that bind. I think your generation knows that they have to work for a living and they stay single longer and they gain skills.
Yeah, actually, I had, not too long ago, I'd read this Pew Research report that had surveyed, I believe it was like women 18 to 24 college age, and they were saying that over 2/3 of women had determined that a successful, high-paying job were, among, if not the most important thing in their life, compared to like 57% of men or 59% of men. So it was showing that, we're understanding that we need to be self-sufficient, which I completely agree with. My goal is to be financially, self-sufficient, independent, confident, because that's how we're going to get places. And even if we don't necessarily unite as a collective group, like we have successfully in the past, I think that if we become a group of women with capital, women with resources, women who are educated, it's going to be a lot harder to hold down that group of women than a group of maybe more demure, dependent women. So, maybe the way we are thinking right now with being more, kind of, I hate to say self-centered, and this generation that I'm a part of is a little more self-centered, but maybe it can be used to our benefit. We can kind of
that has been the
resources.
third wave attitude. The question really becomes, I think, the fundamental question is, does it require political engagement to be able to hang on to your rights? And I would argue that if you don't remember the political piece, no matter how much economic power you may think you have, if you don't operate out of that collective group, or we're going to vote as a block, then you really risk a rollback.
And I think maybe that, that kind of gaining of confidence in capital and resources and just being more independent as an individual, I think that almost leads to political activism because then when something's threatening you, you have more to lose. It's hard, honestly, women who are dependent on men or government resources, it's very easy to become cynical when someone's threatening what little you have. But if you have a lot at stake, I could see it being, easy to jump into activism where you might not have done it before.
There's another good, strong possibility, too. I was writing about this the other day, that, you sort of spend the first 20 years of your life doing things like learning how to walk and talk and figure out how to get some handle on the world. Then you spend the next 20 years sort of educating yourself about what am I going to do for a living and what relationships am I going to have. And that's profound. How am I going to establish myself in that realm? And then from 40 to 50, it's really sort of cementing those gains into some kind of, now I'm going to have to put this together as a solid plan. But I think maybe once you start to hit 50 and 60, that's when you say, how can I give back in a way that if my family has grown and I have more time and I have opportunities to do things, what can I do to contribute to that next generation? So maybe part of it is generational. That Susan, when women hit your age, they say, now it's time for me. I have to do something to cement these gains.
I think it's true, but the challenge for me is growing up. I grew up watching the 60s because I was too young to really participate in most of the protests of the 60s. But you saw and you wanted to emulate the women that were out there protesting. You may not have been out there burning bras because you were too young to have a bra, but you saw it and it was kind of exciting. It was kind of,
they were role models.
They were role models.
Yeah.
And maybe that's the challenge, is that there's fewer, because it seemed like we were there.
That's true.
Yeah.
Hillary Clinton galvanized a lot of women again, don't you think? Was she the symbol for a lot of the next generation women of somebody? Or did the fact she started out as that first lady role in somebody's wife taint that a bit?
I think it tainted it.
Did for me.
And I think, there were some of us that wanted, throw Bill out the door or whatever when,
That was an interesting era because one of the concerns I had was when the feminists to some degree turned their back on Paula Jones. It seemed to me that she had a legitimate complaint against Bill Clinton. She had very likely been sexually harassed by Bill Clinton. And Bill's a pig. There's no other way to put it. He's great on women's issues, but personally he's kind of a pig. And that's always put women in a bit of a box because it seems to me if you get captured too much by one party, then they sort of take you for granted and they don't give you all the things that you need anymore. So you always have to be reinventing yourself. Bill was, I think, a complex figure for women to deal with. Did you want him thrown out of office for his misdeeds and for lying under oath, or did you say, well, but he's good on our issues?
To me, I didn't say either of those. It was like, what the hell? Why are they dealing with that?
Oh, I see.
It's that same. Every one of them has done it. It seems like to me. I know John Kennedy was chasing women around the White House, and Gary Hart was chasing women around wherever he was. They just do it. It seems that power. It's that power position that they have to prove themselves. Yeah. I won't go into it, but because I have this colorful way of putting things. But and to me, it just. So I didn't think that it was a terrible thing, but to have spent and talk about impeachment when all the other lying and all the other corruption and all the other stuff was a crock.
Oh, I felt the same way. It was in the same hand. It was for. If I had been Hillary.
Things would have been different.
Things would have been different, yes. But on a national level, I agree with you completely. I didn't see it as the problem was the power differential, not whether or not he had sex with
the intern.
With all of them.
I didn't care.
I don't care about Kennedy. I don't care about any of them. I do care about lying under oath.
Yeah, and it was the power differential. Yeah. And that's a problem whether it's in a classroom situation, whether it's it doesn't matter where it's in. Where
we still see these things. We still see the power differential on campus, where the male professor who has power over the female students, and the female students, if there is this disparity, and some of the things that happen are not very good for either one of them. And those are worrisome issues, but those to me sort of get handled in the court of public opinion. I'm not sure they need to be politicized. But boy, when they start coming for things like suggesting that I'm going to have a transvaginal probe if I want to have an abortion, there's these different pools of bills. There's some that go after the facilities. They try to say that they're trying to make these places safe for women's procedures, when in reality they're trying to regulate them out of business. You have to have 15 doors where you don't need any, and they don't have enough room to put in the doors, so they can't open a facility. Then there are the ones that go after things like the fetal remains. They're the other ones that make it so uncomfortable for women, waiting periods, chipping away at the amount of
coercion.
Yes, the coercion.
If abortion is legal, coercion is illegal under any circumstance. So
if it's threatening,
coercion there doesn't need to be a crime called coercion to abort. And if there is, then coercion in any sense, whether it's coercion to keep a pregnancy, whether it's coercion to that's wrong. But they're focusing, it's all couched in this, we're going to protect the woman, we're going to protect the fetus, we're going to do this, when what it's it's all meant to overturn Roe versus Wade, and that's
It's a very Victorian view of women as well, that we are hothouse flowers who have to be protected from ourselves.
Mhm.
You know, the case that the testimony on the coercion bill, one of the people who testified was a young woman who said that her parents had tried to talk her into when she was young. I think she was 15 or 16 when she became pregnant, and her parents had said, "We urge you to get an abortion." Now, that's what they meant by a coercion. And to me, that's a parent expressing their viewpoint. And I don't know a group that is so fond of parental rights why they would think that that somehow is something a parent's rights should be restrained and they can't urge their child to take one course or another. And in particular, they were saying, well, if they're using economic coercion, and they were suggesting, look, we're not going to be able to support you and a child. I mean, we want to send you to college. We want to do these things for you, but we don't have enough money to do that and also raise the child. And they were arguing that that was economic coercion. These are bills that I think are fraught with peril on all sorts of free speech grounds.
Do you know what I was just thinking? I was thinking about how it is to get people involved in the abortion thing. And I was thinking that we used to stand on the courthouse steps and tell our stories about having illegal abortions and about how and all the heartbreak and the pain and was the picture of
the danger,
the picture of the woman, the naked woman on her knees had died because she bled to death.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe what we need is women to stand on the courthouse steps and tell their horror stories about the coercion, about the vaginal probes or what that means, about the rantings and ravings. I know that I have a friend in Miami who guards every single Saturday. She gets together volunteers to guard the abortion clinic from the protesters, with the signs and the harassers outside the clinic. And many of the women are going in there for other health care rather than abortions, which doesn't, to me, make one bit of difference. But to tell those stories, that somehow the stories have to be told in that way that we used to tell. And it seems like we
lost the narrative, didn't we?
And we lost that connection.
Mm-hmm.
I know I had 2 illegal abortions, and I swear I know that it's. I don't talk about the whole thing in class, but in conversation in class, it'll come up that I had 2 illegal abortions, and I said, and I don't want you all to have to go back to that time. Mm-hmm. And the other thing is that I've been thinking. I went on the reproductive freedom ride across country on a bicycle ride that we did years ago, and that we were talking about taking it underground, going back, that women take back the abortion procedure or controlling their.
Almost like midwifery.
Right. I mean, we've got chemists, we've got and what I was thinking is, why can't we invent a tampon that has like alum on it? But I know we do have those suction things like that, but I'm sure in this day and age.
We have not come far technologically.
No, well, we must, but it just no one's caring about it. I mean, and I want to get it out of the hands of the medical. I was almost going to do it. Out of the medical profession, out of the damn state. It's no business of the state, and away from the damn church. The darn church.
Yeah.
And I mean, and take it back like women used to do.
Yes.
But take it back in a very safe and very private manner so that the pharmaceuticals aren't in it either. There you have it.
This is LCC Radio, WLNZ 89.7. No, I understand exactly what you're talking about. I think we got to the point, too, where once Bill Clinton changed the rhetoric and said, I am for abortion, but I want it to be safe, legal, and rare, it seemed that somehow we almost started to buy into the shame argument that it was something that you shouldn't say out loud. Let's talk about reproductive health. Never use the word abortion. Let's use the word choice. Let's not talk about the procedure itself. And we bought into the idea that it was always profoundly somehow traumatic and terribly morally fraught. There were people in of varying opinions on that spectrum. It was not all, catastrophic decisions that people had to make. And I think that really, we lost a lot of ground there. I think because we felt that it was settled ground, we didn't need to discuss it anymore. But I think this is a state with a remarkable history. I talk all the time about how it was with Ruth Book and State Senator Lorraine Beebe, who talked about her abortion, her illegal abortion, right down here at the Capitol, just 2 blocks, just a block away. And that was startling that a Republican woman would stand here in the Michigan Capitol and talk about that. She was one of my heroes in this state. We had some bipartisan support from women on these issues in that.
Well, and I think that's changed in part Citizens United in terms of who's getting elected, in terms of, at least on the Republican side, it's virtually impossible to get elected now if you say you're pro-choice.
That's why Condi Rice will not be vice president. Mm-hmm. She will not, she's pro-choice, and so that it makes her ineligible to be the vice presidential candidate.
And 20 years ago, that wasn't the case. I mean, no. 10 years ago, that wasn't the case.
There are some events coming up.
Goldwater was pro-choice, I think, or something.
By the end.
And remember when he ran?
He just simply didn't. He was a libertarian.
We thought, oh my gosh, Goldwater, it's got to be the worst. And I would bless him. Nixon was for the Equal Rights Amendment. Yeah. For goodness sake.
He established the EPA.
I mean, it's like, all these people that in my youth were public enemy number one. They're my heroes now. I mean, I'm thinking, how could it go?
Oh, I can remember when the Goldwater election. I was in 2nd grade. And I wasn't sorry, but I didn't know a whole lot about it. But I can remember overhearing my parents, and they were so worried about him getting elected, and it was just going to be the end of the world.
I'd welcome him today.
I keep hearing young people say to me now, however, well, if they elect somebody like Romney, they'll take things so far right and they'll never elect a Republican again. No, what happens is we just keep moving further right.
Yeah.
I said that about Reagan.
Yeah.
Ronald Reagan.
When that happens, no, you're absolutely right. When that happens, I think it's just the spectrum gets shifted over to the right, and then the left becomes moderate. That's the problem. It just moves the spectrum on. So the more extreme right we get.
Sam Singh held a community conversation last Thursday night about the war on women. And it was interesting because one woman was talking about how, there are excesses on both sides. And I said, I have to push back on that. Boy, I really wish there were excesses on the left. I want to roll back the Hyde Amendment that prevents the use of federal dollars for abortion. I want all these lefty things. I don't see any real lefties out there. I see a few very nice, moderate people, but maybe what we need to do, Penny, I think you and I mean, in retirement.
We can do it.
We can do it.
We have the ovaries to do it.
Bill has been remarkably silent.
I don't understand it.
I know when to shut up to listen. You can learn. But when you talk about the things that have gone topsy-turvy, Bill Milliken, I doubt, could get elected today.
Yeah, I don't think
he couldn't get elected in a Republican. He'd be
quite a socialist Democrat, wouldn't he?
Extreme left.
Yes. He would be. He and Obama would be, just this side of Stalin.
Amazing world.
Now, Susan,
in our lifetime,
there are a couple events coming up that we should probably let people in the community know about. The one that you're talking about is the Purity Myth, and Unitarian Universalist Church of Greater Lansing in East Lansing is going to be hosting this on Saturday, May 19th from 2 to 4. And the Purity Myth is interesting. There's going to be it's a showing of a film and then a discussion. Is that right? And it talks about how America's obsession with virginity is hurting young women. And it is indeed some of the things about the Purity Myth that we ought to know about are there. It does seem to be this sort of Victorian move to try to get. I mean, I watched some sort of profoundly disturbing daddy-daughter dance. Have you seen these things?
Oh, I remember those.
Oh, do you?
Yeah.
Where the daughter makes a purity vow?
Oh, those are different.
No.
These
Never mind. Oh, I thought you meant just the dance. Never mind. Yeah, mine was not like that. Good. I just remember it was,
the little daddy-daughter dance when the little girls are like 7 years old and they get dressed up and they go, That's kind of what
Yeah.
I remember.
I didn't know
But
anything
these
about
are
the
these are
food.
totally different. I mean, these are they dress up and it's like prom time, but it's prom with daddy, and they promise their virginity.
To dad.
That's awkward.
Yeah, really. I mean, like, I can't quite imagine
Oh
doing
my
that.
gosh.
Yeah,
Oh.
it's
creepy.
It's creepy. It really is
It
creepy.
is creepy.
That's very creepy.
And there is this whole sort of abstinence movement that does borderline get creepy. And it's really an attempt. Women's sexuality has always been terribly threatening, I think, to every culture on the face of the earth. And they always grapple with it. But, I thought we had reached a point a little bit better than that. The other event that's coming up is that there is also a showing of Misrepresentation. That's an excellent film that I've shown segments of in my class on mass media, and it looks at the way that the argument is that you become what you see. And when young girls grow up and they watch the Meet the Press on the weekend, and there's maybe, if we're lucky, a token woman, that anytime there's serious things being done on television, then they are always male-dominated. And that for a woman to get a seat at the table, she really, in many cases, has to become hypersexualized. I mean, I watch Mika Brzezinski in the morning on Morning Joe, and it makes my teeth itch. I mean, she wears tight dresses. She sits there like this imbecile, and she just simpers and chats with her kids on her cell phone while the rest of the men talk. And it sets women back about 50 years, And it is this idea that young women are growing up with these toxic images that women have no power. The only way they gain power is to become hypersexualized. Lisa Bloom, who is the daughter of, who's the feminist lawyer? Gloria Allred. That's her daughter. She was on MSNBC a few weeks ago, and she said that, she said, I'm going to tell the truth here. She said, in order to get on this show, I had to have my hair teased. They opened up the top 2 buttons on my blouse. They overdid my makeup, and when I objected, they said, if you don't do this, you don't get on the show. Now that's wrong. She's there as an attorney to give a discussion of a serious topic. They wouldn't tell a guy to whip off that bow tie and show us your hairy chest.
Unbutton your top button on your pants. Wear your pants down around your hip.
That's a real throwback.
Well, and it's also that they'll chastise you for being hypersexualized
at the same time.
Exactly. I remember I was it was about a year and a half ago. I was writing for a online sports magazine, and I'm not going to name their name to even give them that satisfaction. But I was the only female sports reporter that they had. And I don't know if you guys remember Inez Sainz, the Mexican sports reporter controversy. She was covering she was covering, I believe, the New York Jets, and she had just really provocative clothing on, and they just absolutely made a martyr out of her. Yeah. And my editor wrote a editorial, without clearing it with me or anybody else, but wrote an editorial about how all women reporters needed to understand how to be professional and needed to go to seminars to learn how to dress professionally. Oh. So I wrote a very long, mean letter to him and subsequently quit. But I remember in that letter I mentioned to him, as somebody who was at the time trying to, just focus on sports reporting, the women were few and far between, and I could understand why someone like Inez Sainz would try and hypersexualize herself to even get in the door. Yeah. I mean, it's never something that I would think of doing, but I could sympathize with that. I can understand. And I made it a point in that letter to illustrate, don't you think this is being ridiculous? And this was coming from a site that, never covered women's sports, but at the same time would have galleries upon galleries of the world's hottest female athletes, and never covered anything,
Didn't cover any of their
absolutely not. No. Yeah, the only reason you would know who they were was if you had seen them in a bikini on the website. So
women's sports on ESPN basically means beach volleyball, as far as I can tell you.
And it's always on ESPN 56 or,
It is still frustrating. I mean, women need to have that choice. You have the choice of dressing the way you want to instead of the way it's dictated to you. But it's wrong when you go in dressed one way and they tell you that you have to unbutton that blouse and be that kind of person.
I'm glad you don't do that.
I have to see your way on. That's why I stay out of the webcast. Who knows? I could be naked on the other side of the webcast. That's why we're on radio, And this is LCC Radio, WLNZ 89.7 here in Lansing, Michigan. I really want to thank our guests, Penny Gardner and Becky McKendry and Susan Maston, my new co-conspirator for the Lansing area now. Is that the title they gave us? No, I think it's co-president.
Yeah, but hey, you know.
I like conspirator.
Conspirator, maybe.
Maybe more truthful.
Thank you for tuning in. See you next Monday night when we will be talking about the historical tour in Lansing and also talking with Michael McCallum, the local filmmaker. Thank you very much. That was a lot of fun.
That was fun.
Went all over that.